Please, I need your help. What is it? Calm down. My family, they're trapped. I'll help.
Sarajevo, the destruction is everywhere.
I stand here, a witness to the silence.
This is Sarajevo in 1993. The city lies in ruins, the streets silent under a blanket. The city feels silent but dangerous. Bullet holes mar every wall.
Close your eyes for a moment and imagine Sarajevo in 1993. Around you are ruined buildings, streets silent but dangerous, and standing before you is your neighbor, a man who just a few years before the war held a senior position at one of the city's most prestigious banks, now trembling as he offers you a gold necklace. This isn't just any necklace. It's an elegant piece of jewelry accumulated by his family over generations, made of genuine 18-karat gold, worth at least 2 months of middle-class salary in normal times. So what does he want for this valuable item? Medical supplies? An urgently needed medication? No, a pack of cigarettes and 3 ordinary Bic lighters. Think about the absurdity of this moment. Gold necklace worth probably several $1,000s is changing hands for 3 plastic lighters whose total cost doesn't even reach $5. Is this a mistake? Desperation? Actually, this is the crystallized reality of economic collapse's rawest truth. In moments when currency collapses, basic infrastructure disappears, and society shifts into its most primitive survival mode, the definition of value completely changes. This scene isn't fiction. It comes from the testimony of a real person named Selko Begovic, who survived more than a year of the Sarajevo siege and meticulously documented his experiences. Selko's observations go beyond being just one person's memory. They constitute an invaluable data source for understanding the dynamics of value, barter, and survival during societal collapse. And what he describes reveals the exact opposite of what traditional financial advisors and preppers tell us. What does traditional wisdom say? Stock up on gold and silver, invest in physical assets. If you can't hold it in your hand, it's not really yours. I defended this logic for years too. Precious metals have been presented throughout history as a refuge against currency collapse, but when we conduct a forensic examination of Selko's testimonies and dozens of economic disaster cases like this, we encounter a much more complex and disturbing reality. Here is what you will understand by the end of this article. A wise 1,000 investment in the right practical items, skills, and strategies can save your family in a complete economic collapse scenario in ways that a 10,000 gold bar sitting in your safe never could. This isn't just a theoretical argument. It's a reality supported by real data from Bosnia to Venezuela, from the Great Depression to Zimbabwe. The anatomy of currency collapse, much faster than you think. People's biggest misconception about currency collapse is thinking it's a gradual process. They imagine inflation will rise slowly. People will adapt over years. The system will somehow stay afloat. The reality is much more brutal. In Bosnia, the transition from a functioning money-based economy to pure barter took not years, not even a full year, just a few months. According to Selko's account, in the first days of the siege, people were still trying to use currency. Stores were still open, price tags were still there, people were still pulling out their wallets and shop. But within a few weeks, yes, weeks, prices skyrocketed to astronomical levels. A pack of cigarettes that cost 1.5 German marks outside the war zone cost 40 marks in the besieged city. That's a 2,500% increase in just a few weeks. People couldn't adapt. People receiving salaries saw that by the time they received their pay, the money had lost so much value that it could no longer cover even basic needs. Savings accounts turned into piles of worthless paper. Retirement funds evaporated. Normal economic calculations became completely meaningless. Venezuela's experience from 2016 to today confirms these dynamics in real time. The country experienced hyperinflation exceeding 1,000,000%. This figure is hard to grasp. What does it mean in practice? When you go shopping in the morning, prices are one thing. When you return home in the evening, they show a different number. Your salary gets deposited in your account, but it loses half its value by the time you get to the store. People rush to the market as soon as they receive their salaries because they know that tomorrow they'll be able to buy half as many goods with the same money. The bolivar became so worthless that Venezuelans started calling it bitter humor, Bolivar muerto, dead bolivar. The currency literally became an economic zombie, technically still in circulation, but devoid of any real value. The government's response made the situation even worse. They removed high-value banknotes from circulation and gave the public only 72 hours to exchange their currency, 3 days to convert your life savings into the new currency before the government officially declares them worthless pieces of paper. 3 days. Really internalize this scenario. You've been working for decades. You've saved a little money each month. You've set aside money for retirement, maybe for a house down payment, maybe for your children's education. And one morning you wake up and the government tells you, all this money of yours will be nothing in 72 hours. Hurry up. You rush to the banks, but everyone's coming at the same time. ATMs have no cash. Tellers are closed. You panic, but it's already too late. Argentina experienced a similar drama between 1998 and 2002. The economy contracted by 28. This figure may seem abstract on paper, but what does it mean in reality? It means businesses closing, millions of people losing their jobs, the middle class becoming impoverished overnight. More than 50% of the country's population fell below the poverty line. People started searching for food in garbage. Those who kept their savings in pesos experienced devastating losses. Some lost 70-80 of their savings or even more. The same pattern repeats in all these examples. The system collapses rapidly, currency loses value, and most importantly, people never find the time they thought they'd have to adapt. The change is so fast that society gets pushed into a new reality before it can even adjust its reflexes. Return to barter economy. Only utility matters. What happens when currency fails? Modern society returns thousands of years back to the most basic economic models barter. But this isn't a romantic neighbors trading eggs and milk store. This is the rawest, most ruthless form of survival economics. In Venezuela right now today, as these lines are being written, fishermen in a coastal town called Patanamo are bartering their catch for rice, bananas, and plantains brought by people walking from nearby mountain villages. A fisherman told journalists exactly this: money doesn't buy anything, so it's better if people bring food so we can give them fish. Examine this statement carefully. Money doesn't buy anything. This isn't a figurative expression. The currency has literally lost its function. For that fisherman, the bolivars in his pocket are less valuable than the nets he uses to catch fish. At least the nets serve a functional purpose. Farmers in Venezuela's rural areas load their products: 200 bananas, 30 kilos of sweet potatoes, 30 kilos of cassava, 40 kilos of lemons onto trucks and travel hundreds kilometers to Caracas. Why? Not to sell them and make money. Money is worthless. To barter them directly for flour, rice, or pasta. This practice, which seems strange in a modern economy, becomes the most rational strategy. Collapsed system. In coffee-growing regions, the situation is even more interesting. Hardware stores, paint shops, even some pharmacies started accepting coffee beans as payment. 3,100 kilo sacks of coffee can be bartered for 200 liters of gasoline. Coffee beans became a de facto currency because they're a standardized product, storable, portable, and most important, have real use value. You can make coffee with coffee, sell them, barter them for other things. But with the bolivar, you can't do anything. This is economic regression, a return from modern capitalist economy to pre-industrial barter systems. And this return carries a critical lesson for us. In that environment, gold becomes almost useless. Why? Because gold can't be eaten, can't be burned, can't be drunk. You can't use it to purify water. You can't use it to treat an infected wound. You can't use it to shelter from rain. But the person who can grow food, person who can repair a water, the person who has stockpiled antibiotics and hygiene supplies, that person survives. That person holds the power. That person can generate income even in economic collapse, can feed themselves and their loved ones. The Great Depression, the victory of land and skills. We can think of the Great Depression as the laboratory of economic collapse in modern history. Between 1929 and 1939, the United States and the world experienced an economic catastrophe characterized by mass unemployment, deflation, banking system collapse, and widespread poverty. The unemployment rate in the U.S. reached 25%. 1 in 4 people was unemployed. Thousands of banks failed. Millions of people lost their savings. Industrial production nearly have. In this chaotic environment, the pattern of who survived is very clear. Those with productive land and practical skills stayed on their feet. Most of those who only saved money were ruined. Documented experiences from rural Iowa crystallize this reality. Farm families definitely struggled. Crop prices fell so low that some farmers burned their corn as fuel instead of selling it because it was cheaper than coal. Wheat prices dropped to a few dollars per ton. Income expressed in monetary terms nearly disappeared. But pay attention. Monetary income disappeared, but real income didn't. If you value deep, real-world historical analysis like this, support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. And most important, share your thoughts in the comments because these stories matter when they're discussed, not just watched. Farm families with productive land grew large gardens with vegetables. They harvested and canned apples, pears, and cherries from fruit orchards. They produced milk and cream from dairy cows. They got meat and eggs from chickens. They bought flour and sugar in 50-pound bags and baked their own bread. Farm women made clothing from fabric cut from flour and feed sacks. Yes, from flour sacks, because even fabric was a luxury item. Imagine this life for a moment. Zero cash income, no money in the bank, no paycheck, food every day, fresh eggs every morning, milk, vegetables, canned fruit, bread you baked yourself. In practical terms, these families lived richer than many urban families. Now think about urban families. In industrial cities like Dubuque, Iowa, thousands of workers lost their jobs between 1927 and 1934. These workers, even if they managed to keep their salaries, which dropped 30% and nominally, faced starvation. Why? They had no productive capacity. They couldn't produce food. They couldn't sew clothing. They couldn't make basic repairs. They were dependent on the money system for everything, and the system had collapsed. A viewer commented on my last video, "My grandfather survived the Great Depression because he had a small 4-acre farm, carpentry, and painting skills. He had no gold in his safe, no large savings in the bank. Land and skills enabled him to survive." This narrative is just one of thousands of similar stories, and the common of all of them is this: productive assets and practical skills were much more valuable than financial assets. The Victory Gardens movement during World War II proved this principle on a national scale. The government encouraged citizens to produce food, and the result was astonishing. In 1943, more than 20 million gardens were planted in backyards, school gardens, park areas, vacant lots. These gardens produced 10 billion pounds of food. 40% of the total vegetable supply in the U.S. came from these gardens, and 2/3 of them were in towns, cities, and suburbs, not farms, but ordinary people's home gardens. Surveys conducted by 1944 showed that more than half of Americans growing gardens were doing so not from patriotic motivation but from economic necessity. The war effort was an excuse. The real reason was to feed families. The mechanism here is mathematically clear. Farmland generates income independent of economic conditions. You grow crops, income. You rent your land, income. You produce your own food. This is also real income because everything you don't have to by means you've preserved your money. Academic research confirms this dynamic. Studies during the 2008-2009 financial crisis show that while farmland value increased by 17%, the S&P 500 index fell 46% during the same period. While people were losing their wealth in stock market investments, farmland owners were gaining both value appreciation and continuous income. During the 10-year period between 2000 and 2009, the S&P 500 index showed negative returns in 28 different quarters. In 26 of these 28 quarters, 93% farmland showed positive returns. This isn't speculation, it's insurance. This is hard data, reality. Skills, capital that can't be stolen. Great Depression era survival stories read like a catalog of practical skills. What did people do to survive? They fished and sold. They made homemade candy. They grew and sold fruit. They started mobile food wagons. They shoveled snow. They made and sold hand-woven baskets. They made and sold quilts. They repaired and altered clothing. They washed windows. They rendered lard. They butchered animals. They preserved food by canning. They sold firewood. They repaired shoes. They cut hair. Examine this list. What do you notice? Every item involves creating or processing something with tangible value. These aren't abstract financial services. They're things people actually need: food, clothing, shelter, cleaning, repair. The skills with the highest value were those that met basic human needs: food production and preservation. gardening, animal husbandry, canning, smoking, pickling, cheese making. A person who could butcher an animal, preserve meat through smoking, or can vegetables had income-generating skills that no economic collapse could eliminate. People need to eat food whether the economy is good or bad. This doesn't change. Clothing production and repair, sewing, knitting, weaving fabric, shoe repair. During the Depression, people couldn't throw away worn clothing. They repaired it, altered it, reused it. Women and men with these skills were constantly in demand. Shelter improvement and repair, carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, painting. Houses require maintenance. Even if people can't buy new houses, they need to keep their existing homes livable. People with these skills found work even when the economy had collapsed. Healthcare, doctors, nurses, dentists, midwives continued to be employed throughout the Depression. People get sick, get injured, give birth independent of economic conditions. Healthcare is a basic need. Even when currency was unreliable, people found ways to compensate healthcare providers by bartering goods and services for medical care. Mechanical repair, cars, tractors, tools break down. People who could repair them were valuable, especially in rural areas. A tractor not working could mean a family couldn't grow crops, which means starvation. Here's the critical point that gold critics and financial advisors often miss. A skilled carpenter represents a valuable asset that can't be stored in a safe. The skill resides in the person and can be used when needed. It's portable, can't be stolen, at least not easily, and maintains its value independent of economic regime. Gold sits in a safe and produces nothing. It generates no interest, provides no rent, grows no food. It just sits there, waiting and hoping its value increases and someone is willing to buy it. But during economic collapse, no one wants to buy gold. Everyone wants food, tools, and practical goods. Selko's lessons from the siege of Bosnia. What has value in real collapse? Selko Begovic's narratives about the Sarajevo siege are far more valuable than theoretical predictions. These are first-hand testimonies of lived reality, and what they describe challenges many of the common assumptions in the prepper community. When currency became completely worthless, certain items emerged as the most valuable barter tools. The list is unexpected. Ammunition, ranked highest, but Selko gives stern warnings against freely bartering. Anything you sell to another person in the form of weapons can be used against you the next day, he says. Security considerations dominate all trade decisions in real collapse. Bartering something that could be useful to someone is also risky. Hygiene supplies. Bleach can purify hundreds of gallons of water, far more valuable than its purchase cost suggests. A liter of bleach might cost a few dollars, but it can make hundreds of liters of water drinkable, which can be life-saving. Bars of soap, toothpaste, toilet paper, feminine hygiene products gained astronomical values. A bar of soap that cost 50 cents before the war was bartered for a dozen eggs during the siege, nearly a 1,000% value increase. Medicine, antibiotics, painkillers, antiseptics, bandages, first aid supplies carried extremely high value. Selko notes that many people died from lack of access to basic medicines. An infected wound can become deadly sepsis without antibiotics. Without painkillers, a simple toothache becomes unbearable. These supplies weren't luxuries, they were survival tools, batteries and lighters. Our dependence on modern technology reveals how vulnerable we are during power outages. Batteries were critical for running flashlights, listening to radio, communicating, and lighters. Here's the lesson that changes everything. Selko recommends having 1,000 Bic lighters instead of an expensive fuel-powered generator. Think about this. A good generator costs several $1,000s. Why are 1,000 cheap lighters better? A generator makes noise, and noise is an announcement that you have something valuable, making you a target. It consumes fuel, and fuel can be more valuable than gold during collapse. It requires maintenance, and you can't find spare parts. It's heavy, not portable. And most importantly, it attracts attention from people who could steal it or even think they can take it by force. Lighters, on the other hand, are silent, light, small, portable. They can be stored in multiple places, so they're not all lost or stolen at once. They're very cheap too. By now, thousands of lighters cost a fraction of a generator's cost, and most important, they're refillable. Selko's own strategy was to have a large propane tank equipped to refill disposable Bic lighters. He constantly bartered refilled lighters for food, candles, and other needs. What's the value of a lighter? It provides fire. And what does fire mean? Heating critical to not freeze. Cooking, making raw food edible. Light to see at night. Water purification. Boiling is the simplest way to make water drinkable in a siege environment. All of these are non-negotiable needs. And here's what confuses people. What challenges prepper dogma? Gold and jewelry carried weak value during the crisis itself. Selko's statement is striking. Warlords and armed groups took precious metals from desperate people in exchange for a can of soup. Why? Because the warlords understood gold will retain its value after the crisis ends, when reconstruction begins, when normal trade returns, when international markets reopen. Gold will still be valuable, but now, during the siege, it's worthless for immediate survival. People holding food and practical goods held the power. Venezuela's collapse is a tragedy for academic study, but an invaluable case study for practical survival strategies. This isn't historical theory right now, as you read these words. It's happening in real time. A woman named Killa Oval lives near Caracas. She grows eggplants, tomatoes, and passion fruit in her backyard specifically. For barter, she barters these vegetables with neighbors in markets for pasta, sugar, milk, or rice. In an interview, she said, "My family lived like this at the beginning of the 20th century. Now we're living the same way again." Modern economic collapse returns societies 100 years back to pre-modern economic models. The words of a fisherman in Patanamo are striking. "I haven't been to the city center in almost 2 years. What would I do there? I don't have enough money to buy a shirt or shorts. It's better to be here, bartering items to survive." Official currency became so useless that even the effort to obtain it through paid labor no longer makes sense. Venezuela's health system collapse shows the value of stockpiling medical supplies. As we saw in Zimbabwe's parallel collapse, black market drug prices reached astronomical levels. Antibiotics that cost a few dollars in stable countries sold on the black market for 10 times, sometimes 100 times their original cost. A dose of amoxicillin could be worth a week's wages. People who stockpiled basic antibiotics, amoxicillin, azithromycin, ciprofloxacin bandages, painkillers, antiseptic supplies, had extremely valuable assets relative to their initial costs and storage requirements. A bottle of antibiotics might cost a few dollars, but it can prevent an infected wound from becoming sepsis, literally the difference between life and death. Compare this to precious metals. A person with an ounce of gold can't use it to treat an infected wound, can't eat it, can't burn it for warmth. In a medical emergency, that gold bar does exactly nothing, but a bottle of antibiotics can save your life, which is more valuable. Community, the overlooked survival asset. Prepper culture generally focuses on individual preparedness. Stockpile food for yourself. Acquire your tools. Develop your skills. But meta-analytic research covering 148 different studies with 308,849 participants reveals a striking reality. Individuals with stronger social relationships have a 50% higher survival probability compared to those with weak social relationships, 50%. This figure is enormous. For comparison, it's the magnitude of the health impact of quitting smoking. Social connections affect physical health in ways that exceed many established risk factors for mortality. Selko's explanation emphasizes this dynamic. He describes how almost all barter during the siege of Bosnia took place. People knew each other. They learned about someone who had something they wanted to barter, usually through friends of friends. Then they made private arrangements. The best situation was if you knew that person before the war, so you'd already built trust. Why? Because bartering with strangers is extremely dangerous. Someone could rob you. They could follow you and learn where your home is. The barter goods they brought with them might turn out to be a trap. But if you're bartering with someone you trust, maybe a neighbor you knew before the war, a former work colleague, someone who went to the same church, your risk is much lower. Trust-based relationships become economic infrastructure when formal systems collapse. When contracts become unenforceable in an environment without police, in a situation where courts don't function, the only thing left is your reputation and your relationships. A viewer made a perfect comment the Amish community shares and helps. Each other community is something missing from many preppers' strategies. Absolutely right. Communities with established structures, neighborhood organizations, churches, mosques, mutual aid networks, sports clubs, professional organizations can coordinate crisis response, pool resources, and provide support much more effectively than isolated households. You can stockpile 6 months of food by yourself, but if 20 families come together and pool their resources, everyone is in a much better position. In Venezuela, communities informally organized food sharing and barter networks that help distribute scarce resources. In Bosnia, structures emerged like neighborhood defense groups, resource sharing systems, communal water collection points, all of these organized around community networks. This means that developing relationships with neighbors, joining community organizations, and building trust-based networks should be prioritized as highly as, perhaps more than stockpiling supplies. Social capital is survival capital. The mathematics of gold's collapse insurance claim. Gold advocates market it as collapse insurance. They claim that when currencies fail, governments collapse, gold will retain its value. Is this claim true? Partly yes, but timing is everything. And here's the problem. Gold provides very little value during the collapse itself. It can only regain its value after systems restabilize. Consider the siege of Bosnia, the case where the economic system most completely collapsed. Gold carried almost no value during the height of the crisis. People were giving it away for a can of soup, for a box of matches, for a few matchsticks. Why? Because in immediate survival, gold plays no role. Food feeds you survive. Water lets you drink survival. Tools let you produce and repair survival. Skills produce services that people barter survival. Medical supplies treat diseases and wounds survival. But gold can't be eaten, non-functional, only valuable if someone else wants to barter for it. And during total collapse, no one wants gold. Everyone wants food, water, tools, medicine, security. In the early collapse stages, when people are desperate for food, medicine, security, gold isn't what they want. During the siege, people who had gold but no food production capacity starved to death. People who had productive land and skills but no gold thrived. Gold can only regain its value after civilization stabilizes around a new equilibrium. When trade restarts, when international markets reopen, when monetary systems are reestablished, then gold can become currency again. But this could be months, years, even decades later. Meanwhile, holding only gold while others hold productive assets, a person has suffered throughout the crisis without producing income or survival means. The 2008 to 2009 financial crisis demonstrates this dynamic. The S&P 500 index fell 46%. Gold initially fell, then recovered. But farmland? It increased in value by 17%. And most important, farmland provided stable income returns throughout the crisis. Rental value, crop sales, direct food production. This occurred independent of what other assets did. Whether the stock market is high or low, whether gold rises or falls, farmland continued producing food, continued providing income. Here's the brutal math. From 1992 to 2020, farmland's average volatility value fluctuation was 6.84%, less than half. The S&P 500's 16.9% volatility, and notably lower than gold's 14.8% volatility. Farmland not only provides income but also value stability. During high inflation periods when currency loses value, farmland returns averaged 14.67% annually. That's more than double the inflation rate itself. In other words, farmland not only provided protection against inflation but also provided real returns. This isn't theory. This is historical data. Decades of actual performance. Current global situation. Dominoes lining up, looking at the global economic landscape. Concerning patterns emerge. Multiple countries are at different stages of economic collapse. Venezuela, stage 5, complete collapse. Barter economy, currency nearly worthless, basic goods shortage, mass migration. This is the textbook example of modern collapse. Turkey, stage 3 and progressing. Official inflation figures don't reflect the real situation. While citizens flee the lira, gold savings accounts have doubled in the last 2 years. Central bank reserves at concerning levels. Lebanon, stage 4, banks froze savings accounts. Yes, people can't access their own money. Currency lost 98% of its value in 18 months. Medical supply shortages, food shortages, power outages. Argentina, recurring economic crises. Citizens no longer trust the peso, hoarding dollars, using cryptocurrency, anything but their own currency. And the elephant in the room, the United States, $38 trillion national debt and rising rapidly. The Congressional Budget Office projects deficits will continue indefinitely. Debt interest payments now exceed defense spending. The government spends more money to pay interest on debt than to fund the military, the Federal Reserves. Balance sheet has expanded by trillions since 2008. Quantitative easing, money printing, is no longer an unusual emergency measure but has become standard policy. Globally, central banks are buying gold at the fastest pace since 1996. A historic turning point in 2022. For the first time, central banks bought more gold than US Treasury bonds. What does this mean? Other countries' central banks are losing confidence in the long-term reliability of the US dollar and US government debt. A viewer made this comment: "My only objection is this This assumes currencies will collapse individually. I think in a few years we're looking at a general collapse of Western currencies. I'm afraid I agree with this assessment. Here's why. For the first time in civilized history, 100% of the world's currencies are fiat, meaning none are backed by gold, silver, or anything else real. They all depend on government decree and confidence, and government's fiscal discipline is deteriorating globally.